Hi, my name is Bunmi Akinyemiju, the CEO of Venture Garden Group, headquartered in Nigeria.
Welcome to the African Tech Roundup, Bunmi.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Wow. Some moving and shaking you've been doing for sure. And by you, I certainly mean the organization you head up, a tech group that I'd like to learn about and hear more about. The Sure Remit, ICO, that's been trending of late. Definitely something I'd like us to talk about. The massive investment you've taken on from Convergence Partners, of course, who also have a massive investment in the likes of CCOM. Give us a sense of where this all began.
It all started really from the days of high school and kind of taking an interest in technology, software development, and entrepreneurship. And pretty much my second week moving back to the US where I was born, I joined a startup. I mean, highly entrepreneurial guys. They had just started a company called Artemis Solutions Group out of East Lansing, Michigan. And it was just fun, joining these guys who wanted to change the world of DNA analysis, forensic testing, paternity testing. So taking my interest in software development and entrepreneurship and startups and joining these guys, I got hooked. And since then, have gone on to start, multiple other companies right there in the US up until 2011, where I decided Africa is really the next frontier, and essentially moved back, dropped everything I was doing in the US to my co-founders of those different businesses, moved back to Africa with a couple of my co-founders. And since then, it's been an awesome ride.
Do you think there's something to the fact that you came up in Michigan, except for the cold? I mean, I can think of quite a few parallels to Nigeria in the sense that I think even Americans themselves think of Michigan as sort of somewhere out there. And of course, except for, that killer sort of football team at Michigan State.
Yeah.
Definitely a state being put through quite a bit at the moment in terms of like the economics of, of being an American state. Do you see anything to that in terms of your thinking and your approach to problem solving and starting up in Nigeria? Do you think any of that is related at all?
Absolutely, Andile. I think you make some good points there. In that, especially the time that I was professionally involved in Michigan. It was kind of this time where economy was tough. I mean, Michigan was the darling of America, right? That's where Ford came out of. That's where General Motors came out of. That's where the auto industry.
We forget. We totally forget because I mean. I'm sorry, but I mean, right now, I mean, when you think of like third world America, you kind of think of, Detroit and or rural Michigan, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And so imagine doing a startup in Michigan, right, where auto industry had collapsed, the government had just rescued the industry when Obama came in, and it's kind of like this boring old Midwest, environment where people felt, there's this entitlement kind of culture, and but like it was over, right? It was all about Silicon Valley and like in New York, the center of financial, the financial center of the world. Boston, with MIT and innovation coming out of that. So when anybody talks about tech entrepreneurship in Michigan, it was kind of like, no, just tell me about U of M or Michigan State football and basketball, and then let's move on to other things. Now, but with all of that, I mean, I think we were able to create some interesting companies. We were able to grow them. We were able to use, kind of, not the kind of talents that you have access to in Michigan is not going to be the one you have in California. But how do you now leverage teamwork of guys who are, maybe they're not, they're not your LeBron James, right? But they
Right.
are, talented people who just work extremely hard. And can you create an enterprise out of that? Can you create success out of that? And that's what we really learned. That's what Michigan taught me, was you don't need, the sexy, LeBron James, and Kobe Bryant to make a company happen. It's really about the grit, the resilience, the hard work. Also, we didn't have venture capital, right?
If I'm a VC in 98, well, somewhere between 98 and 2011 when you were at Artemis, I'm sorry, but you're not getting my money. Do you feel like that sort of attitude? And I mean, I speak to Nigerian founders, and I say Nigerian specifically because I mean, you guys have the Africa's largest population, and on paper, really you ought to be the biggest deal on our continent. Do you feel that that similar sort of attitude of, I don't want to say disdain, but really being underestimated, and really just how important as an ecosystem Nigeria is and should be?
Absolutely, absolutely, completely. I mean, and I think that's why I really loved how you drew the parallels between kind of Michigan, Midwest in the US context, and Nigeria, Africa in the world context. I think it's the same way where
Yeah.
when you look back, back into the history and the richness of the African culture, and the people, and the kingdoms that that were here back in the day before colonization and all those different things, and slavery and those types of things. I mean, I think in the same way, you kind of have Africa, you have Nigeria, where there is a lot of potential, right, in terms of the people, in terms of the population, in terms of the youth, in terms of, and you can see that all you need is that enabling environment, and it becomes exponential. We've seen this happen in Asia already. And, and like they say, Africa is the remaining continent that hasn't seen that, it's the last one to pop. And so for me, that was why Africa was so interesting, was I should be there early, before this big pop happens. Let me get there. Let me get into the grind. Let me help to, be part of that transformation. And the same things that helped me to be successful in Michigan, that grit, that resilience, right? That aspect, that underdog, right? That you're underestimated, and it's never worked before. Why are you going to be the one to make it happen? I mean, I think it's the same thing that has helped us really be successful in Africa so far, because we understand that we don't need super rock stars to make things work. What we need is a good team, people with integrity, people with a lot of grit and resilience, people who are willing to learn, who are humble and are just like committed to learning more every single day and doing things better, that continuous improvement type of mindset, and people who can think big as well, right? Think continent
Yeah,
scale.
absolutely. Well, look, I mean, I only have so much time with you. A million questions come up because of what you've just said to me. But I'm going to need to rush to what most people are going to be super interested about in terms of having you on. Give me a sense of what Convergence Partners bought into. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it would have been 2015 when they sunk $20 million into Venture Garden Nigeria. What would you say your sell was? What were they buying into?
Absolutely, absolutely. Very, very good question. Essentially, Venture Garden Group focused on two things, data and payments. And we kind of feel that we can build a solid continent scale enterprise by bringing those two capabilities together. Data enables transparency, right, which is something Africa needs. Data enables investment and attracting capital, which is what Africa needs. Data removes, corruption and fraud out of value chains, which is what Africa needs. And then, of course, with payments, the aspect of payment means that you can take all the paper money flowing around and convert that to digital. What that means is you essentially, catalyze trade, right? You reduce the friction between customers and businesses and peer-to-peer and so on and so forth. So essentially, VGG is this kind of fintech B2B company that takes this data capabilities and payment capabilities into different sectors to help transform those sectors. So essentially, Convergence bought into this holdco that has this payments capabilities and data platform, which becomes a platform that you can use to then go into new sectors. So we created a subsidiary called Avitech. We created a subsidiary called PowerTech. We created a subsidiary called EduTech. And all of these different subsidiaries, at the end of the day, they're just a manifestation of combining payments and data to help solve certain challenges in a particular sector. And maybe I should give you a couple of examples to sort of make it real.
Yeah. Yeah, because my next question would be, how do you determine what's within scope? So perhaps the example will help.
Absolutely. So the beauty is that there's one core platform. There's one core payments platform, one core data platform. You can then essentially, and of course everything's exposed via APIs and everything, and you can then combine those platforms and take it into, let's say, aviation. So within the aviation sector in Nigeria, all of the international airlines that fly into Nigeria and the domestic airlines that fly inside Nigeria essentially connect to our aggregator. By connecting to our data aggregation platform, it means that online real time, I have a sense of all flights movement, how many people are on the aircraft, how much they're paying, and so on and so forth. And that data then enables the relationship between the airlines and the government agencies to be more seamless, to be more online, to be more real time. Now, government can use that data to plan and so on and so forth. And essentially, our business model is to expose that platform to corporates and government and charge a small transactional fee. So that's a good example of sort of the use case for our platform. But the platform is now available for any other company to take advantage of it. Let's talk about education as an example. A university wants to automate the process for how students pay, how they register for classes, and how they take classes remotely. Essentially, you connect that educational institution to our core platform behind, and essentially it shortens the timeline to automate the key processes as long as it has to do with payments and data. The good thing is that anybody can build new platforms or new companies on top of our platform. And I think Convergence saw a very scalable platform company where essentially the growth scale is exponential because you don't have to go and acquire all the customers yourself. Essentially, third parties can essentially build new solutions, new sectors on the same platform. Even though for the past 6-7 years, we've been building our own subsidiaries on top of the platform, but essentially the capital from Convergence is now enabling us to open that platform up for anybody in any country to essentially build companies, faster, quicker, to solve industry-specific problems.
And how much of that vision was set back in 2011 when you started, and how much of it, sort of evolved in time? Did you pivot?
Absolutely. Good question. I think just like any other entrepreneurial journey, you usually start with a picture of the problem you're trying to solve and how you're going to go about solving it and so on and so forth. But then reality hits. Reality hits and
TIA.
Exactly. Then you now have to essentially pivot, and that agility is really, really important. And I think in Africa overall, one of the lessons I've had is that, yes, you start with a vision, but until you go to the market, until you go to the customer and you sit down there with them, not for 1 hour, not for 2 hours, but every single day for weeks and for months to see what the problem is before you bring tech. And then also, as you develop the tech, get them involved in the tech. I think so many people make the mistake of sitting down in the US or in London or in Lagos, and you're designing something for a small town or a small university or a small airline in some small city somewhere. Really, we've learned that you need to sit down with them, because that's essentially how you get to evolve the vision from what you might have thought about at the beginning. So to answer your question, it has really evolved. We knew that data and payment are sort of ubiquitous challenges that the continent has. It took us essentially creating 4 or 5 subsidiaries that are using those platforms to automate a particular industry, a particular corporate, for us to realize that, oh, okay, we must make this a platform that is truly open, a platform that is like API only. Oh, we must really make sure that all of the solutions are designed where you're thinking about offline first, right? Everything you do, it must be able to work whether there's internet or not. Your end users are really going to be using mobile phones more than big computers and so on and so forth. So all of those things would have been difficult to completely envision on day one. And so we've really had to learn from the market and sit down with our customers and sit down with the ecosystem companies to essentially evolve what the platform looks like today.
Quite a few people I speak to feel that the process you've described really should ideally be financed by long, patient cash, as opposed to sort of venture capital that's like chasing, massive year-on-year, growth, exponential growth, and that kind of thing. In Convergence Partners, they strike me as somewhat of a hybrid, because they certainly play in the sort of PE space, but they definitely have a sort of VC approach to things that's not typical within the PE scene. What's your sense of this? Because I mean, I'm looking at your timeline. It's open in front of me with your group. I'm on your site. I'm looking at the timeline of your growth. There's no possible way that in 2017, in 2018, looking back to 2011, this could have been part of some roadmap that was sold up front. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's I think the topics you're hitting on are areas that I'm very passionate about, right? Number one is, we all know it. There's a gap of capital in Africa, but funny enough, the gap actually exists more in that earlier stage seed and early stage kind of Series A money. It just really doesn't exist. But now there's a lot of money, there's excess money on the other hand at that PE space, right? The guys who are I'm looking for a company doing EBITDA of $5 million, $10 million, profitable already, and I can invest growth capital in. How much do you want? Do you want $5 million, $10 million, $20 million? Not a problem. There's a lot of capital there, but there's a big gap in the early stage kind of space. And when you look at it globally, right? I mean, look at the top, 5, 6, 7 companies in capitalization in the world, right? Companies like, Facebook and Amazon and so on and so forth, and Google. I mean, these companies were startups, right? 15, 20 years ago, right? So if the early stage capital wasn't there, the world would not be where it is today, right? In terms of this large company. So we have this challenge in Africa, but how do we solve it? And I think that's where guys like Convergence Partners are really, really a godsend. I feel like because of their experience, right? These guys are ex-entrepreneurs. They've started companies before, and so on and so forth. So their perspective to investment is very, very different. And I'm really grateful for running into these guys and the relationship we have with them, because more than your traditional PE, they actually get it. They understand the platform play, right? They understand that it's not about, the profitability on day one. They understand the J curve, right? You have to understand the J curve that, hey, the first 2-3 years, it might be zero revenue. It's just like when Google was giving
Yeah.
away Gmail and this types of things. Nobody ever thought that it was just a play to aggregate this data that is going to give rise essentially to the largest, advertising company the world has ever seen, right? So
Would I be right in saying that the average VC outfit operating on the continent today would probably overlook a venture garden group
definitely.
because of the lack of vision and perhaps a short-sightedness or pressure to deliver a certain result within 4 years or 3 years or whatever the LPs are chasing?
Exactly. I mean, these guys they'll bring you the Excel spreadsheet. They don't necessarily understand the platform play or want to understand the platform or how aggregation of data might turn into cash 5 years from now, right? And that's where you miss the boat, because the priorities of the company will now move to more of a Wall Street format, right? Quarter over quarter is just
Yeah.
about the short term, and it's all about the bonus for the executives in that short term. Meanwhile, they're not creating that long term, platform play, which again, companies like Facebook and Google has really shown how you can execute a platform play very well, especially when you have the capital mix available. So it's really been a joy working with those guys, Brandon, Idan, Andile and the crew, because that understanding of technology, of early stage investment, is there. And I really hope that there will be more of those types of companies, of investors, in Africa, which also leads me to the other arm of what our venture guarding group is doing, right? After essentially creating this payment platform and this data platform, we also realize that the ability to grow the platform revenue is going to be a function of how many companies we can help either create or accelerate or invest in or partner with that can continue to consume our payments and data platform. So we essentially created an early stage kind of VC vehicle, that looks for startups like Sure Gifts, like Flutterwave, like Minds.io, and so on and so forth. Essentially, the startups that rely on a payment platform behind the scenes to enable their solution are very interesting for us.
So I'm aware of your activities in this space, and I was wondering what's the common denominator between all the sort of startups you've decided to the portfolio you've decided to build in that space. It does appear that your approach addresses the sort of oversimplified or underestimated challenge of doing what Google did in the Silicon Valley context and what Facebook did in the Silicon Valley context without the supporting infrastructure in place.
Absolutely. It's a tough environment, and again, because of the immaturity of the consumer behavior, right, and the infrastructure, the power and telecommunications infrastructure required to really capture the market opportunity here. But what we've seen is that what you really just have to do is to focus. And each one of these subsidiaries I talk about is a focused business that looks at the specific problems in a sector and just tries to unbundle it, automate it, create a solution that the customers want, and make money out of it. But because of the lack of infrastructure, long-term funding, and those types of things, it means that your staying power has to be strong, right? You have to be able to just stick at it till you can turn it into a profitable business on a standalone basis. So that's the thesis that guides everything that we do, whether in the aviation business that we started, or the educational business that we started, or the power sector business that we started. But what enables the ability for each of those businesses to become standalone, profitable faster is then the platform behind them, so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel across the stack. You don't have to think about your cloud infrastructure. You don't have to think about the security behind it. You don't have to think about all the licenses from the central bank you need to operate a payment system. You don't have to think about, creating your new data analytics system, or buying a platform like Tableau or ClickView or Power BI, or all of these different things that are not necessarily designed for the African environment. So that leaves you to then innovate around your core business. I mean, let me give you a perfect example. We have a startup that's called Helium, that does healthcare automation, right? They're just a standalone company. We saw them, and we saw that they provide automation for healthcare offices, hospitals. They automate everything from appointment all the way to your insurance claims and prescriptions and labs. But we saw that behind their success has to be reducing the friction around the actual payments from patients, or the remittance from the insurance company to the doctor's office. So essentially, we said, "Hey, Helium, we love what you're doing. This is awesome." And we worked with them, quite a bit, and we said, "Hey, but guess what? You don't have to think about these things. You can just focus on your business and just run it and just plug into this payment platform." And it's been an awesome relationship since then. Same thing with RentSource, that provides solar energy systems for homes.
Basically, Elon Musk, look out. And yeah, they just raised, didn't they? They just closed around, yeah.
$3 million or so.
Yeah.
Successful guys doing awesome work. But behind it is again, that payment system that is very important for them to be able to focus on their core business.
The big thing, obviously, that has gotten Venture Garden Group trending. And out of interest, before I ask the last question, or the last bunch of questions about Sure Remit, this ICO, your thinking about it, the why, the audacity of it, what numbers do you typically throw out there sort of publicly to sort of describe the size of your operations at Venture Gardens? Is it revenue? Is it your employee number? Is it?
Yeah. No, typically we talk about the size of the company in terms of our revenue. In terms of employees. As an example, so as of the end of last year, we had about 250 employees, right? That's from that's growing from about 150, the prior year. So pretty fast pace of growth there, people wise. We also talk about valuation, right? Because at the time our Convergence, came in, we were roughly around, $60 million or so in valuation, which obviously we're excited about the growth of that valuation into the future. So we also talk about that in terms of, valuation growth and how we plan to roll out our long-term strategy, which sort of ends in 2022. Right, so we have a 5-year, growth plan to essentially take that $60 million or so valuation to about $600-700 million in valuation by 2022.
Sounds good. So let's talk about Sure Remit, man. One of your portfolio companies. Goodness me, the headline, grabbing nature of the moves they've made lately. So in December, you guys, Sure Remit basically told the world that they'd be looking to float a coin. Give me a synopsis of what the play is here. There's vouchers involved. And the reason I'm super excited is not, and I have to admit, because I am totally sold on cryptocurrency as a trend. I'm excited because I feel like this is the best example of how Africa is beginning to participate in this global trend. So give me a sense of what Sure Remit is trying to do and why Venture Garden is all about that thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So here's how everything plugs in. Sure Gifts is a company that, a couple years ago or so, we invested in, again, because it fits into the model that I spoke about earlier. They need that infrastructure, that payments infrastructure behind them. And essentially, Sure Gifts was a company that's doing gift vouchers. A corporate can decide to give out gift vouchers to their customers or their employees at the end of the year, or for, long-term service to the company. Here's a gift card, or your birthday, here's a gift card. And essentially, just like a Starbucks or a Walmart gift card or an Apple iTunes gift card in the US that you can just take to the store and use it to buy, grocery at Walmart. Essentially, that's the way Sure Gifts works, in Nigeria. So that was a company we invested in, and they're connected to our payment platform behind the scenes. And, fast forward, the gift card company has been quite successful, and it works very well. People are transacting on it, high volume, a merchant network of over 500 companies, in the US. But what they started seeing was there's a lot of companies and individuals outside of Nigeria that are buying these vouchers remotely and then, sending it to their loved ones. And so they were like, oh, there's a remittance play around, gift cards. Like, that's the problem, right? So yes, you can go to Western Union to send money, but then it's costly. It takes multiple days. And then you have no control over what that person uses the money for. Whereas people were buying these vouchers from Sure Gifts to essentially be able to control which shop, which merchant, what you buy when they give the gift cards to the beneficiary. So that was essentially how this concept of Sure Remit as a product came about.
Wow, that's quite a story. Sure.
Yeah. And I mean, it was just like a light bulb moment, and we're like, oh, so essentially that voucher, that gift card, which by the way is digital, it's just a number.
It's a form of currency, actually. It's a form of exchange. Well, I mean, what is it if not currency?
Exactly. And essentially in a closed loop environment, it's a closed loop, voucher network. And essentially that is one of the best use cases for blockchain, right? And so, essentially that was when it was from there, everything became just super clear. The guys, built the Sure Remit platform on top of, blockchain using the Stellar, the Stellar network. And essentially, from doing that, what's the other problem in Africa is the problem of capital, early stage capital, right? And of course, with solving the problem around capital, there's been crowdfunding and those types of things. Yeah. And ICOs is kind of like the new age way of raising, capital. So it's essentially a newer form of crowdfunding, except that it is more friendly to companies that are utilizing blockchain, because the concept of blockchain is really all about this decentralized and transparent network. Yeah. So the two concepts come together, and it's always frustrating for me because people always confuse the fundamental concept of blockchain with Bitcoin, right? Yes. And they're not the same thing.
Obviously not. But I mean, here in this case, you guys hitting two birds with one stone. Sure Remit's definitely hitting two birds with one stone here. Raising capital that's obviously needed to grow the company, no doubt. And simultaneously bringing online this whole new method of exchange of value within a closed network.
Perfect. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better than you did. Essentially, it's solving those two problems at the same time.
That is a boss move. I'm sorry.
It's incredible. It's incredible. I mean, and the best part of this is that this was supposed to be an ICO that would take between, 1 month, 1.5 months, and in less than a week and a half, it was sold out.
Jeez.
Literally, Korean funds from Japan, from Canada, and I think at the end of the day, there were about 1,200 or so individual investors that are just like, hey, I love this. Oh, you mean this thing can solve this problem that Western Union cannot solve? All right, I'm in. Here's
Could anyone participate? Was it open to anybody? Like anybody?
Pretty much. That's the beauty of an ICO, right? And of course, just like an IPO, an ICO is a similar concept. You publish your white paper.
Yes, which I read and ignored. Goodness.
Right. But the best part, here's the best part, right?
Yeah.
You can ignore it, but the good thing about it is that it's such a transparent process where as long as you're a diligent, individual, you're just going to jump on the Telegram chat, just like WhatsApp. And you just watch all the experts asking difficult questions.
Yeah.
And they're throwing questions at the team.
Yeah.
And you just get a sense of how well, is the team responding to the questions? Is the expert happy? And by the way, this expert could be some guy sitting somewhere in China or in California asking with a PhD from Stanford and asking difficult questions. But all of this question asking and answering are all in the open. It's not like Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, 5 analysts looking at the data room, closed door. No.
And it's behind closed doors as well. So,
exactly.
Look, I suppose this is why we do the podcast. I have to admit that right now, I think I'm overloaded with how much there is to know about this new thing. And it just feels safer, even prudent, to sort of go, well, let me give it like a good couple of years before I make a decision about this. But I have to admit that having read through the white paper you put out, and also having, spoken to some of the people who've been directly involved, hats off to you. I have to admit that it's been done really well.
Thank you.
And I have to say this, I have to sort of caution those who will take that and run. The reason it's important that Bunmi has said everything he said is because for every one of these sort of offerings out there, there's at least 50 or 60 you really should be staying away from. So
definitely. Definitely. A lot of scams out there.
A lot of scams.
Yeah. You have to be careful.
And so you have to be careful. And I think that's what you guys got right before. I'm sure this idea might have been in the works, perhaps even as an idea to raise capital for some of your other ventures. But I feel it would have been premature if you guys hadn't waited for your brand to prove itself, for the value behind the ICO to be so steady that
no, absolutely,
even
absolutely.
To get it to this point. So really up and down in terms of execution, I have to give you and your team a personal standing ovation for how well you guys have handled this, and I really do hope it goes well from here. I know we're out of time, and I will not hold you any further. I must thank you so much for being on the show, Bunmi.
No, thank you so much. And I think a lot of kudos to the Sure Gifts team. I mean, those guys worked really, really hard. And thanks for having me on the show. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. We must do this again. And I believe you're in Joburg at least 2 or 3 times a year. Give a brother a shout. Let's catch a coffee so I can give you that handshake in person.
I sure will. Thank you, Andile.
Sure thing.